Hi, this is Dawn Billings, and today we're going to talk in much more detail about the why behind the 6 personality colors that I use as the base for the Primary Colors Personality Insight Tools. What is personality and how did it begin? How important is it? How does it affect our relationships, happiness, and ability to succeed in life? Well, let's examine a bit of the history in the world of personality. We will begin by defining the difference between personality types and personality traits. Personality type refers to the psychological classification of different types of individual. Personality types are sometimes distinguished from personality traits, with the latter embodying a smaller grouping of behavioral tendencies. Types are sometimes said to involve qualitative differences between people, whereas traits might be construed as quantitative differences. According to type theories, for example, introverts and extroverts are 2 fundamentally different categories of people. According to trait theories, introversion and extroversion are part of a continuous dimension with many people in the middle. Now let's begin by examining why the majority of personality tests are 4-quadrant. In about 450 BC, Hippocrates' theory of temperament proposed the existence of 4 personality types. Each of these encompass a fixed set of inborn intrinsic characteristics: sanguine, pleasure-seeking and sociable; choleric, ambitious and leader-like; melancholic, analytical and quiet; and phlegmatic, relaxed and peaceful. Most formulations include the possibility of mixtures of these 4 types. In 1921, Carl G. Jung brought this ancient understanding into popular consciousness through his book, Psychological Types. Carl Jung founded analytical psychology. The central concept of analytical psychology is individuation, the psychological process of integrating the opposites, including the conscious with the unconscious, while still maintaining their relative autonomy. Jung considered individuation to be the central process of human development. Jung developed 4 types off of Hippocrates' theory of temperament. Out of Jung's work, Myers-Briggs type indicator was formed. Officially published by Henry C. Chauncey in 1962, this old classic was developed by Catherine Cook Briggs and her daughter, Isabel Briggs Myers, and has been around close to 50 years. It was, of course, built off the Swiss psychologist Carl C. Jung's work entitled Psychological Types, The Psychology of Individuation. Taking the test results in one of 16 types with the titles like ESTJ and INFP. These refer to 4 polarities such as extroversion, introversion, thinking, and feeling. The test is used to assess preferences without easy links to strategies or role models, so really require an expert to interpret the results and translate it into effective action. The origins of DISC began in the early 1900s and was pioneered by the work of Dr. William Moulton Marston. With a PhD from Harvard in a newly developing field of psychology, Dr. Marston set out to examine the behavior of individuals in their environment and focus on the styles and preferences of such behavior. Dr. Marston authored a book in 1928, Emotions of Normal People, which explained his view that characteristics of behavior can be grouped into, of course, 4 major behavioral styles. DISC, D-I-S-C, refers to 4 behavioral types of test assesses: dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. It is more focused at behaviors than preferences, but has the same Jungian roots as Myers-Briggs type indicator, and there are correlations of the two. Teams find DISC easier to grasp and explain than Myers-Briggs type indicator, but both systems lack clear strategies for success or tailored tools for specific industries or relationships or modern challenges. In 1978, founder Don Lowry, the person behind True Colors, became interested in the work of clinical psychologist David Keirsey. Keirsey, author of the best-selling self-help Please Understand Me, studied the work of psychologists Carl Jung, Catherine Briggs, and Isabel Myers, who theorized that all people fit into one of 4 broad categories of personality. The color code personality profile created by Dr. Taylor Hartman once again divides personalities into 4 quadrants and uses a basis of colors: red, motivated by power; blue, motivated by intimacy; white, motivated by peace; and yellow, motivated by fun. The general breakdown suggests that reds comprise 25% of the population, blues 35%, whites 20%, and yellows 20%. A 45-question test assesses one's color. Dr. Taylor Hartman maintains behavior is only an outward expression of what is truly happening on the inside of a person. The theory of driving core motive to answer the questions of why was Dr. Hartman's goal. There's a quote: "In all the years Dr. Taylor Hartman's research into the subject, he has never come across someone who was motivated by something other than power, intimacy, peace, or fun." I think this quote lacks a full examination and bundles important motivators that may look similar, but can in reality motivate very differently. A special note: the primary colors personality test, which I will explain in much more detail, of course, takes motives into important consideration as well, but divides them into 6 categories and further distinguishes between personal motivators and their opposites, relational devastators. These motivators and devastators correlate with the centered and extreme personality tendencies that Primary Colors Personality Insight tool focus on as part of a person's contextual color blend. Primary Colors' 6 motivators are power, fun, appreciation, excellence, fairness, and effectiveness, while the relational devastators that correlate with those powerful motivators are domination, impulsivity, victimization, perfection, prejudice, and compulsive productivity. StrengthsFinder, a more modern test created by Gallup and championed by Marcus Buckingham. StrengthsFinder focuses at your strengths rather than focusing on preferences or behaviors. The test identifies your top 5 strengths out of a possible 34, accompanied with a relevant modern philosophy. Focus at your strengths and you will be happier and more productive for it. This test is more predictive and proactive strategy than Myers-Briggs or DISC, but lacks an intuitive model that team members can transfer and implement easily. In the 1970s, 2 groups of personality researchers independently came to the conclusion that most personality traits can be boiled down into 5 broad categories, now known as the Big 5. They are openness. Those who score high for this trait tend to enjoy adventure and being open to new experiences. They are creative, imaginative, intelligent, curious, and of course, adventurous. High scorers for conscientiousness are generally organized and dependable. They are responsible and hardworking. Then there's the extroversion scale. Those who are high on this scale draw their energy from being around others, so they tend to be more sociable, not to be confused with outgoing, but sometimes they're tied together. They're friendly, lively, active, and talkative. Those who score high on agreeableness are often trusting, helpful, warm, caring, soft hearted, and sympathetic, and very compassionate. And then there is the neuroticism or emotionally stable continuum. People with high scores for this trait are emotionally stable, confident, and don't tend to worry often. But when they score higher on neuroticism, then they are prone to worrying and having lots of anxiety. According to Geoffrey Miller, each of these traits acts like a continuum, where you fall at some point along the scale between high and low. These personality traits develop from patterns that emerge from large amounts of research data and present a bit of a translation problem for many people. Geoffrey Miller emphasized one implication is that the insane are often just a bit more extreme in their personalities than whatever promotes success or contentment in modern societies, or more extreme than we're comfortable with. Social well-being, one's connectedness to society, and beliefs that one can contribute to society's growth is a good predictor of mental and physical health. Studies show that increases in openness, extroversion, conscientiousness, and agreeableness, and decrease in neuroticism correlate to increased social well-being. So why in the world, with all of these very good personality inventories, did I imagine that there needed to be one more? And especially needed to be one more that was a 6 personality hexad versus a 4-quadrant personality inventory. I studied under personality experts, Doctors Robert and Joyce Hogan, as I worked toward my doctorate degree in organizational psychology. I received my master's degree in clinical psychology and had a private practice working with women, couples, and families who could not afford therapy and believed that understanding personality from both a clinical perspective and an organizational perspective would provide a broader base for my therapy work. I was doing family systems work, which meant that I would have anywhere from 4 to 7 members of a family in one session, and I learned 2 things very quickly. In order to initiate change and insight, you must quickly be able to create a new language that will break through the always already listening, knowing that people come into the office to see you with. And as a therapist, you must capture the family's attention in order to interrupt their strong desire to capture you or to sell you on their side of the family dynamics story. I realized I needed a personality insight tool, but I also needed a relational tool, a way to help others interact and communicate differently with people that they cared about. One of my favorite quotes by Carl Jung, "Your visions will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." I, like thousands of others over the years, admired and was inspired by the work of Carl Jung. I agreed with Jung that the psychological process of integrating the opposites, including the conscious with the unconscious, while still maintaining relative autonomy, was very important and imperative to the individuation process. But I was also frustrated by the 4-quadrant model on which the personality types had been explained for decades, because I realized while working with people that it was limiting and lent itself to categorization versus contextual insight. I began looking for a more in-depth, comprehensive model that while remaining simple to understand and implement, could build into a much deeper, more complex, and contextual personal insight and relationship tool. Context is an extremely powerful force in the life of human beings. We are not the same in all contexts of our lives. We use different skills and tendencies at work than we do as intimate partners, or our behaviors may change depending on our stress levels, challenges, or environment. Although basic personality traits remain stable, the intensity and blend of our personality colors may alter depending on the context we are experiencing at the time. To gain the most insight, I wanted a test that you could take imagining that you were happy or angry, or a test that you could take imagining that these are the gifts and talents and skills you needed at work, or these were the gifts and talents and skills you needed at home. I was very inspired by the work of Walter Mischel in the field of contextual personality assessment. In 1968, Walter Mischel, an American psychologist specializing in personality theory and social psychology, published the now classic monograph, Personality and Assessment, which created somewhat of a crisis in psychology that changed the agenda of the field of type and trait psychology significantly. Mischel showed that study after study failed to support the fundamental traditional assumption of personality theory that an individual's behavior with regard to a trait, conscientiousness, sociability, extroversion, agreeableness, is highly consistent across diverse situations. Instead, Mischel's analysis revealed that an individual's behavior, when closely examined, was highly dependent upon context or situational cues rather than expressed consistently across diverse situations that differed in meaning. Mischel maintained that behavior is shaped largely by the exigencies of a given situation. In other words, context. This fascinated me. Mischel made the case that the field of personality psychology was searching for consistency in the wrong places. Instead of treating situations as the noise or error of measurement in personality psychology, Mischel's work proposed that by including the situation as it is perceived by the person and by analyzing behavior in its situational context, the consistencies that characterize the individual would be found. And I totally agreed. Mischel argued that these individual differences would not be expressed in consistent cross-situational behavior, but instead he suggested that consistency would be found in distinctive but stable patterns of if-then situation behavior relations that form contextualized, psychologically meaningful personality signatures. For example, she does A when X, but she does B when Y. In a large observational study of social behavior across multiple repeated situations over time, Mischel and Schoda's research showed that, as predicted by Mischel, people were characterized by highly psychological, informative, if-then behavior signatures. The primary colors personality tools call them contextual personality color tendency blends. Mischel was one of the first psychologists to propose that personality may not be an enduring trait, but rather an adapting mechanism, which integrates both internal and external cues to elicit situation-appropriate responses and emotions. I concur with Mischel's theory and believe that connections between cognitions and emotions are always changing, but the relations between cognitions and affects remain stable, thus establishing seemingly predictable contextual outward personality tendencies. My husband is an artist, and fascinated by the idea of the artist's color wheel that he used to mix the varying shades of his paints, I began to study colors as they worked together on the artist wheel. I began to study colors that related to light and realized that colors on the artist wheel were based on very similar colors that light refracts through a prism. It was exciting that the idea to base this whole idea of personality on this color wheel, that you could find these color blends in nature in millions of complements, shades, and intensity. The primary and secondary color combination was so simple, and yet it could help me explain core motivations, rational and irrational relational devastators, centered and extreme personality tendencies, distinct core value differences, as well as differing interpretations of the world as seen through different colored lenses. The fullness of the colored wheel, colors, and the relationship between them, I believed was the perfect base to help me explain my ideas about personality, context, blends, intensity, and centered and extreme behaviors that I watched my clients move in and out of day after day. I began developing this simple yet complex insight tool, and I named it Primary Colors Personality Insight Tools. My ultimate goal in creating the Primary Colors Personality Insight Tools was to create a jargon-free, universal, easy to understand and implement, contextual personality insight and relationship tool that would allow people to gain insight into automatically relied upon personality tendencies they might revert to in different life and emotional contexts. Taking into consideration the fact that human beings do not usually experience conflict, frustration, strife, and stress when they are happy and things are going the way they want in their lives, I decided to focus on helping people understand what choices and behaviors they had a tendency to use when things were not going well, when they actually were feeling stressed, angry, or frustrated. I believe that once you understand that relationship struggles are not born out of your centered personality color strengths, but that they arise when things become difficult, challenged, and confusing, you can spend time and energy gaining understanding of what color personality tendencies, centered and extreme, you actually do rely on in life's most stressful situations. I created an insight tool that could be used to provide many levels of personal insight, easily and easy to understand and implement. A personality test that was easy to take from the perspective of several emotional or life contexts, so that a person could determine where their autopilot choices and behaviors, in particular emotional or stressful state, might land them on the primary colors personality wheel. Once you become aware of your autopilot color tendencies, you can insert a conscious choice between a stimulus and your response. You can then choose to continue to use color personality tendency blends that have not provided positive results in the past. In other words, you can keep choosing behaviors and thoughts that have failed you and your relationships, or you can consciously choose to consider utilizing a different blend and range of personality colors to see if it will provide you with more positive outcomes and bring you more of what you want to experience in your life. I began using it in a very simple way. I would have all of my clients take the primary colors personality test, and then as they walked into my office, I would give them a pair of glasses that were the color of their primary color. I would have them all look at a wall and tell me what color the wall was. Of course, the wall was actually white, but they would tell me the color of the lens that they were looking through. So someone looking through red lenses would say the wall was red. Someone looking through green lenses would say the wall was green. Someone looking through purple lenses would say the wall was purple. As I had them slip the glasses off of their faces and they realized that the wall was white, I explained that we can get very argumentative, we can get very upset, we can even get angry if we think that that wall is orange and someone else is telling us that that wall is purple. But all of us see the world through different colored lenses. Then I began to explain what the different colors meant, and it became so much fun and much more like a game. Although incredibly simple, this personal insight tool could help people understand opposites in their personality, such as centered and extreme personality tendencies. And although universal, it was a tool that could and would become very personal for those who used it to gain insight into their choices, attitudes, and behaviors. The Primary Colors Personality Insight tools gave people from every educational and socio-economical level a way to understand their strengths and motivation, to center their extreme personality tendencies that were causing havoc in their lives, and it helped people understand who they were in different contexts of their lives, who they were at home and how that might be different than who they were at work, without defining, pigeonholing, or excusing inexcusable choices and behavior. Since its conception, this personality insight tool has been licensed and utilized by relationship researchers, the armed services, corporations, churches, volunteer organizations, schools, and most importantly, within family structure to transform relationships that were destructive into healthy, happy, strong, functioning, and connected bonds. It provides a simple way for people to understand how to use their strengths and talents to live the dreams in their hearts, while also understanding those extreme personality tendencies that cause them great misery, frustration, disappointment, and despair. A quote from Dr. Helen Fisher says, "We are all social creatures, and a deeper understanding of who we and others are can provide a valuable tool for understanding, pleasing, cajoling, reprimanding, reading, and especially loving others." Over the years, I've continued to develop these insight tools in order to help families and couples deal with stress, conflict, and challenges in a more stable, respectful, and insightful way. Respect is the cornerstone of all healthy relationships, and understanding the personality color blend of yourself and those around you brings a deeper, more loving, understanding way to life. So, take the Primary Colors Personality Test and learn what colors you use to paint your world in different contexts and situations. Again, this is Dawn Billings, and it's my pleasure to walk with you through the history of personality assessment tools and help you understand the uniqueness, the power, and the effectiveness of the Primary Colors Personality Insight tools.